What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about the aftermath of really today with Assassin's Creed Shadows. It got, I think, more and more split as the day went, didn't it? You see it on Twitter, but even if you go on YouTube and you watch, I think 3 in all, 2 from Ubisoft, 1 from IGN, is a good way to kind of gauge it, right? And it's very split in terms of likes to dislikes. It seems like, truly, at least by that metric, for every one person that likes it, there's another person that doesn't like it. So I want to talk about the main controversy with Yasuke, right? I think that's the main driving force. But let me first say something that hopefully will not offend. I actually think if there's any problems with today and with what we've seen, it's actually there's maybe 2 bigger problems than that. One, we address, actually maybe both we addressed in the video earlier today. I actually have a really big problem with the always online thing. I think for a game like Assassin's Creed that is completely unnecessary, they're doing it for infinity, and we've talked about this, and I keep telling you my life story with game preservation. Insanely important. We just saw Ubisoft kill the Crew 1 2 months ago because it was an always online game. Sure, it's been 10 plus years. Sure, it's had more games come out after, but we just saw them kill a major game, at least back then, from Ubisoft. We just saw that 2 months ago, and yet we're going to allow Assassin's Creed to just be able to come out and potentially one day be able to be removed. I don't know if there's confirmation if like the collector's edition is going to actually have the physical disc. I haven't seen anywhere whether it's actually going to be physically or not. You can definitely let me know in the comments. I hope it's physical because I just want the game to survive. And even if it is, you have to eliminate that always online thing. I would imagine, at least to satisfy me, okay? So that's one big thing. Number 2, maybe the biggest to probably most average people, okay? People that don't live on social media or live on Twitter, which includes myself. I'm not making fun of anybody, but also people that are not like, super insanely into game preservation. The main thing I would think that you would come out of today thinking is, wow, sounds cool. A lot of cool promises, but where's the delivering of those? And I even kind of predicted this a few days ago, right? Where it's like the trailer can set the tone, it can give us a little look, but ultimately the things they say are just going to be the things that they say. And it's not to say they don't sound cool. In fact, I've praised throughout all of today a lot of the positives, and even people are finding other smaller things as the day goes. They're eliminating like the question marks, and it sounds like the map is not going to be so massively filled. It's more about you getting to a high area, looking around and seeing what you find. I like that quite a bit. That's absolutely learning from the past. And there's other smaller things like that, although small. I don't know if you would even consider that small. I would actually say that's a pretty big step. So, we've seen a couple of those things. Those are definitely positives. Again, it's all about how you deliver. It's about that final part to it. So I would say this. Obviously, the Yasuke thing is the biggest thing that people are talking about, but I would hope, especially as it gets closer, I hope it's like the other things, like the actual game itself, what you're going to actually be playing. Does Ubisoft stick to the good? Okay, now this leads us to the next part, which is, of course, the big drama. So I'm going to try to make sure I'm keeping my words in line so nobody misunderstands me. Here's what I would say, okay? I don't think it's as easy as saying one thing or the other. And what I mean by that is what I've seen so much on social media today is one side calling the other just whatever, and then the other side calling the other side whatever, right? If you don't like it, you're this. If you like it, you're that. And I think both sides are kind of doing the exact same thing and they don't even realizing it. You're kind of boiling it down to just one thing. If you don't like his ethnicity, then all of a sudden you're this word. Or if you back it, then all of a sudden you're this other word. It shouldn't boil down to that, but it does because it's social media. So that stuff I would specifically say I really hate. I feel I've always done a pretty good job of just allowing people to speak. As long as you're not crossing any lines, I mean, you can put the comments, your own comments in the comments section. You can think whatever you want, right? As long as you're not crossing lines. And again, I also think that's another thing people are not very much being respectful of today, is they're just kind of saying whatever. I think there are lines that can be crossed, and I think maybe in some cases they have. Okay, is it okay that he's black and that he's in this game and they chose him? I will say this. To me, it's about the game. And I mean this from the bottom of my freaking heart. I do not mean that as a cop-out. The way I look at it is when the game comes out, is he a good character? That's it. That's it. Now, you can have whatever opinion, I suppose, that you want of him leading into it, where it's a bad idea or it's a good idea. Where I will stand, and I would say pretty confidently right now, is I just want to see the end product. If he is there just to be there, and I've seen tweets about like, hey, is this like them just checking boxes, right? Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. And I think what answers that question, again, I truly believe this, what answers a lot of these questions of, is it woke? Was it done for this reason? Was it done for that reason? At the end of the day, the game will hopefully give us our answer. If it was done naturally, if it feels natural, then that's your answer. If it wasn't, then that's also your answer. I think it's okay for it to actually go either way. I think some people are really afraid, if it going, I really do believe that. I think there's some people on Twitter where if this actually works and it's like completely fine and it makes sense and, he's a great character, she's a great character, they'll flip out and they'll say, we can't have that. But on the other side, if it literally was just done to pander or whatever it might be, then the other side would say, oh my dear God, like there's no way that could have happened. That's what I really think we're at. So I really don't look at it as a cop-out. My honest opinion is the game itself needs to prove it. This conversation is still just a part of what we just talked about. The promises, hey, you see it in a trailer, you hear what they say. We know about a little bit about their background. We know one of them is actually Japanese, by the way, right? So we know all of these small things. We don't know how it executes. We don't know the execution on anything. We don't know how the gameplay is going to go fully. We don't know how it's going to look. We don't know how it's going to perform. We don't know about, just smaller things. Are they actually going to pull it off? We also don't know how the characters are going to go in the same way as everything else. So I really feel like, what we just talked about in the beginning, this is a part of it. It's just one part of, hey, they're saying all these things, but you have to deliver. You have to execute on this stuff, right? And a couple other things I guess I would point to. I do think people are kind of cherry picking, right? One thing that I try to do, and maybe I don't do it all the time, but I really want people to like stick to their guns. So if you're going to do one thing for one situation, you need to do that one thing all the time, right? So I have seen a lot of people saying, well, what about Neo? And what about Shogun? There's a lot of things where they take these creative liberties and nobody seems to care. But then when it's done another way, people seem to care. Now, I don't think that necessarily makes you that word, right? The word that people just like to throw around so easily on social media. I think it could be, and maybe it's been argued, like for Neo, right? Neo is a smaller time thing. It might be better than Assassin's Creed. I'm not saying like it's worse or anything, but it's on a different level in terms of scale, in terms of people that know the brand. You quiz people on the brand of Assassin's Creed or Neo, and you tell me which one is going to come up more. You know what I mean? So it could be that reason. It could be because some people are certain ways. I don't know. I'm not willing to just throw that word out there. In fact, I don't think I've ever thrown that word for as long as I can remember as easily as these people on social media. So that's another way that I try to approach this is if you have a problem with it, which I don't know if I'd be willing to say like that's just outright wrong, to have a problem with it, but you need to have that same mindset. And I would truly say this. You need to have the same mindset for everything. I respect people more when they try to have like this mindset and they apply it to everything. There's no double standards. There's no, well, if Neo does it, it's cool, but it's smaller than Assassin's Creed. So when Assassin's Creed does it, it's, I see a lot of that actually as a defense where it's like, well, Assassin's Creed is so big. Assassin's Creed has been around for so long, and when they finally get to do a Japanese game, they don't choose a Japanese male. Okay, well, a couple things. Number one, that doesn't stop that double standard. If you're okay with it with Neo, if you're okay with it with television or movies, then you need to be okay with it here if you were okay with it over there, right? So that's number one. Number two, there is representation. Like, number one, I don't know how historically accurate it's going to be. We talked about that earlier today, right? He was there for a couple years, and there's a lot of gaps in that record book of like where he went and how he even achieved some of this stuff. So was he actually there? Yes. Is he of Japanese descent? No. But you actually have two protagonists that are both going to have their own individual missions, and then you're going to be able to swap them whenever you want. She is the representative of Japan. And so the people, and I'm not saying like that's the greatest thing or that's the worst thing, but for the people that say, well, it took them this long, it took them 30 years to make an Assassin's Creed Japanese game, and there's no Japanese representation. Well, there is. One of the two, 50%. Now, maybe you could say, and maybe this is an argument, you want 100%. I have seen people say, well, you would never do this for another one, right? Like if you did Egypt, if you did Origins, you would never swap that one. But are you really swapping it? That's also where I think it gets a little messy. I don't know how many things you need to have your way, if that makes sense, right? Where it's like, you're not swapping because he is historically accurate. He's even considered big. Like, he's kind of an anomaly. Like, you know, if you look at this stuff, right? I was reading it this morning. Like, so far from the trailer, it looks somewhat like they're, okay, not everything, but at least the depiction of him, right? So it's like, okay, so they're not like swapping out, and they do have 50% of the main cast being, you know, from the descent that you want. The other one isn't, but he's not a created character. It's not like they just made him up on the fly because they needed somebody that's black. He was real, and he was actually there. Now, did he do everything that he's going to do in the game? No. Did she do everything? Well, she's not even real. You know, I think her father, right, is an actual individual in history, right? So, you know, that's just, I guess I'm just trying to stack. Like, this is how I see it. Ultimately, I can keep going, I guess. I'm trying to nail like the hot points that I've seen online. But truly, the reason I started, you know, this topic the way I did is because that's what I feel so much about. You can keep arguing. You can keep going. And trust me, I'm sure people will. Those dislikes are not going to stop. And you know what? If they're not going to stop, they're not going to stop. That people have the right to say what they want to say. People have the right to leave a like or leave a dislike, right? They have that ability. They have the ability to buy the game or not buy the game. That's another ability that people have. But ultimately, how I stand playing hundreds of games as I have, and hundreds of games over there and hundreds of games on my consoles. I just said it. Games. It's the game itself. For me, you know, yeah, you can rub somebody the wrong way. You can get somebody excited, right? Like either or. You can do all that stuff in the promotion, the lead up and all that stuff. But ultimately, I judge games based off the games. And I'm not saying you have to judge it a different way. I'm telling you what I do. So when this game comes out, I'm not going to be afraid to say things, but I'm judging it for the game. If they are good characters, they're good characters. If they're bad characters, they're bad characters. That's it. There's no anything else. And I'm sure it won't stop, right? Because if they're good, they'll say, well, it's still woke. It's still whatever. If they're bad, there'll be a lot of told you so's, or maybe people will just try to ignore that it's bad. It's not going to end. I also want to throw in, as we're approaching the end of this video here, I saw a couple of tweets that said, like, can there be just one game that doesn't have drama, like doesn't have this kind of discourse? And I actually think that's right. Like, maybe indie games, like smaller under the radar stuff, but it just actually seems like every game has a problem now, right? And I'm not saying like they're not deserved. I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about okay, that's where I actually think a lot of people would draw the line. Why can't we just have games where like nothing happens, we don't talk about it? Well, do you need to talk about something or do you not, right? But, you know, I think back to like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is my game of the year. There's a lot of discourse about that because of the exclusivity and because of the sales. Hades 2 had its own drama. That's one of my favorites of this year. You go back a few years, how about Elden Ring? Well, Elden Ring also kind of had drama, especially with like the difficulty stuff, right? From Software games always have the drama of the difficulty modes, and if it's not accessible enough, it just seems like every game, big or even medium size, because I wouldn't say Hades is the biggest game of all time. It's more medium. Helldivers 2, now that was PlayStation's fault that, you know, they kind of messed that one up. Xbox has had problems. Just seems like we can't get a game. Starfield, how long do you want to go, right? Infinite Wealth did the paying for the new game plus. Every freaking game either does it to themselves or there's like anger manufactured. You just can't get a game that doesn't have it. So I do agree with that. And I hope one day we get a game, you know, where we can just, you know, ultimately that's not going to happen because there's always going to be something, right? But maybe we can get a game where just everybody agrees on one thing or the other. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.